Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Canadian Podcow. We're fortunate to be coming to you again from the Dairy Farmers of Canada Annual Policy Conference in Ottawa, and I'm here in person with Andrew. Andrew, how are you?
You know what? I am great. I actually really enjoy this conference because it gets to the heart of a lot of important issues that I think for us as dairy producers and an entire dairy industry, just need to be mindful of and just need to kind of have our eyes set on, whether that is in, new technology, whether that's in consumer habits. Today, though, is in market outlooks. What's it look like for us as producers in terms of, are we going to have a market? How big does that market look like?
Yeah, it's crazy, all the, we feel some uncertainty on the farm and looking at things, what's happening in the world right now. You come here and you see some of the speakers that are on the list and just get to go home with something new in your mind about what's happening elsewhere in the world, what's happening in markets throughout nationally and elsewhere. And it's just pretty neat to go home with some different perspective on what you've got going on the farm.
It is, and so that's what today's episode is all about, is what's that market outlook look domestically and what's it look globally? Our guest now is Chief Executive Officer at JERA. He has led numerous strategic consulting and research assignments throughout the food chain. He also oversees all of JERA's consulting activities in the dairy sector. He created the JERA Dairy Club 13 years ago, whose members now include 25 of the world's largest dairies, including some Canadian companies. Christophe Laforget, welcome to the Canadian Podcow.
Thank you very much.
It was a fantastic presentation you gave here at the annual policy conference, and I want to kind of pull apart a few things.
Okay.
You had the room on the edge of its seat because I think your perspective of global dairy really is fascinating. Here in Canada, I know producers in our area really do have a focus and want to see growth in the market. That's what they'd really love to see. Your presentation showed, kind of a 1.5% growth here in Canada over the next few years in production. Can you tell me how we compare to other countries? What's the global perspective of production growth look like?
Right. I think you will be able to grow your milk collection. I think the data is around 1.3, 1.5% per year for the next 5 years. And that's compared more or less to what the US would be able to do for the next 5 years. We're also in the range of 1.3% per year. But you need to compare yourself also with countries like Europe, which for the moment it's zero, but will be negative, so below zero in the future. And look about New Zealand, also another major country where the milk collection will also be below zero. So you are going to be, in the middle range of the countries. But you've got a higher potential than only your 1.3%. And maybe I can give an example. And I was in the US last year speaking in front of, it was 2 years ago, speaking in front of US dairy farmers and dairy producers. And they raised the question at the end, asking me, Christophe, what is the best place to produce milk in the world for the future? And they were expecting me to say, yes, the US. And actually my answer was Canada. And they were not happy at all.
Well, you've got the invitation to come to Canada and not back to the US.
Exactly, yeah. No, but the key point is you've got everything here. You got from green energy, from land, from feed, one of the best genetic in the world. You've got everything you need to grow your milk collection.
Well, we like to hear those things. Tell us more. I'm curious about why we're seeing negative trends in other countries and what it is that Canada can really bring to the game at this point, in your view.
We are negative in Europe. We will be negative in Europe and close to zero in New Zealand because of environmental constraints. You need to remember that we've, especially the EU, have signed some agreements that by 2050 will be net zero in terms of carbon footprint. And by 2030, we will be minus 35%. So we need to engage into actions there. And one of the main action is to reduce emission from agriculture. And on the agricultural side, dairy and beef, or let's say meat, represent the biggest share. So the only possibility to reduce this greenhouse gas emission will be by having less animals, keeping these animals longer on the farm, but there will be, at the end of the day, a reduction of the milk collection.
So then that's the production side, what's actually coming off farm. Talk a little bit about demand and consumption. Is it the same trend that's going negative, or are we seeing growth as global population continues to grow?
Okay, so yeah, you've got two different trends there. One is, let's start with the EU, where the growth of the consumption will also be negative. And we are a mature market, and we're going to continue to eat more cheese, but less butter, less liquid milk, etc. That is really a problem for the future. But on the other side, we've got the US, who will continue to eat more and more dairy products. Canada will continue to eat more and more dairy products. And so at world level, the growth will be in the range of 0.8 to 1% per year for the next 5 years in terms of gross consumption. And China will continue also to be big, but the question is where the milk will come from for China.
So if you're watching the news at all right now, and you touched on this in your presentation, but there's a lot of unrest, tumultuous times for agriculture in Europe, and you mentioned something about hope. Maybe even said there's no hope anymore for European agriculture. Where does that come from? Like, what's the situation driving that?
I think we've got a problem. One of the major problems in the EU is there is a major difference between Canada and the EU. Is in Canada, you are proud of your producers. We are not. And we are blaming them for most of the problem we've got in terms of pollution, in terms of climate change, in terms, et cetera, et cetera. And the problem is, it's easy to blame these guys, and because they represent less and less in terms of total population, they are less powerful than in the past. But we are really blaming our farmers for everything's happening in Europe. We are not proud of our farmers. And I think that's the key point. And the second point is in terms of money, or let's say revenue, it's pretty low compared to what your system allowed to have. And you've got, from my point of view, you've got a great system. And can you tell a European saying that? My God! But you've got a great system who really brings stability, and the pressure in Canada is more relying on the head of the processor, where in Europe is in the head of the producers. That's really the point.
And when you talk about that pride that Canadians have for farmers, it's something we could, I think, continue to talk about a whole bunch on this. Yes. But one of the other things you actually brought up in your presentation, and you even mentioned it now, that consumers are going to eat more dairy. You made the comment, and the line was along the lines of, we've lost the war on getting people to drink milk. We need people to eat dairy instead. Can you talk about what those numbers look like in terms of where that decline in fluid milk is, and the increase in things like, you mentioned cheese having a lot of potential?
Yeah, let's start with liquid milk. Liquid milk, it's a lost war because we've been losing ground for the last 15 or 20 years in more or less every, let's say, developed countries, Canada, US, and the EU. The interesting point is in the US is massive. For the next 5 years, we will lose close to 1.5, 1.8 billion liters of milk of non-consumption through the liquid sector. Where in the EU, it's interesting because we are still losing ground, but less than before. Because the consumer now, with the finding that the taste of milk is good, whole milk, for example, is going up again. That is interesting. The half fat or low fat is a disaster. Whole milk is going well. Also everything linked to the lactose-free seems to go as well. Organic is a disaster in Europe, but A2 is starting to grow in Europe, and also what is growing in Europe is grass-fed, because this is very simple to understand. Organic is difficult to understand. Grass-fed, easy. Cows outside. So my feeling is we will not go back to positive world anymore on the liquid side, but there will be some pocket of growth, as we've seen in Canada, we've seen also in the US and in the EU.
And if I think about what I see in my pantry at home and in my fridge, I think it's totally right that we as a generation even are enjoying more to eat milk, to use different types of ingredients. And you talked about that, about the tremendous potential for dairy in ingredients themselves. So as nutritional and functional foods, we're big on protein for adult nutrition. How much potential are we talking about globally? And how do you think that fits for Canada in terms of using those components of the milk?
First of all, I think as a whole, every kind of dairy products is going to be used more and more as an ingredient. We can talk about cheese. Cheese on a pizza, it's an ingredient. Cheese on a burger is an ingredient. And we will not eat cheese as it is as much as we used in the past, but it will be much more through the ingredient sector. Same thing for butter. We are producing cakes, croissants, whatever. Same thing for liquid milk. The interesting point is why we are still having a decline, but not as much as we used to have, is because we've got all of these cappuccino, latte, and whatever you want, and that use quite a lot of milk. And so that is one point. Ingredients, the ingredients will continue to drive the market, let's say the ingredient sector. When you talk about technical dairy ingredients, so goes to the dairy proteins, to the whey proteins, etc. What drive the market there is call it adult nutrition as a whole, based on sport nutrition, day-to-day nutrition, could be also elderly nutrition, medical nutrition, and all of these sectors needs more proteins. And protein is the base of the development of this sector, and they need good quality proteins for the future. And so that is one point. How does that fit with Canada? I think on the Canadian market, there is a need to have new investment on the ingredient sector in Canada. That will come. And you are going to be able to produce great quality, because brand new plants, etc., of mainly milk proteins. So you take out the fat, and then you go for the skim milk, and then you produce your proteins, and that can be exported. And I think the key point is here: if you go for MCI, MPI, so meaning the 90+ concentration, these are allowed in terms of export. Okay, don't say it too loudly, but this is allowed to be exported. But the interesting point is the Canadian market needs more, and you need to catch up on the other market in terms of usage of proteins in a lot of products, and more R&D, more NPD, etc. for the future. So that's how Canada fits into the image.
Well, it's really encouraging. I think before I had met you previously, and we talked about the cracking of milk and different components, and it's hard to even imagine that there's all these different parts, but making the best use of them is so important for our country. Before you wrapped up, you also touched on plant-based products. Can you give us a little bit, just before we finish off, about how you see that market evolving in Canada in the context of all the things we just talked about?
It's, first of all, I just want to go back, 10 years or something, and where everybody was thinking at that time that the dairy market will be killed by the plant-based, and it's going to be a disaster for the dairy products, etc. And actually, it's exactly the contrary. And so that is a very important point. Plant-based has developed. There is a market for plant-based products, and because the new generation, as you were saying before, and I'm sure that in your fridge, you've got maybe oat milk, you've got maybe soya milk, you might have whatever, plus liquid milk, because of various applications which need, for a smoothie, some kind of stuff, for a cappuccino, another one, etc., etc. We've got a market which has not been cannibalized by the plant-based, and actually have been growing with the plant-based. And plant-based, for me, is an extension of the dairy cabinet. And the proof of that is most of the dairy processors are having their own plant-based products. So that is one point. In terms of the future, we tend to see that these markets are mature now. Also in Canada, in US, in the EU, we've on the normal life cycle curves, and you are on the top now for this market, especially on the liquid one. And the only possibility, as you know, is either you find new solutions and then you can grow again. Otherwise, the market will decrease gently, but will decrease. And so what will be the next generation of liquid? For example, with potatoes, we see some product with potatoes in Europe, for example, etc., etc. But we need to find a new solution there. Otherwise, it's going to have exactly like for liquid, and for liquid milk will go down.
Well, it's also interesting, and I think if there's a takeaway for me, it's just the thought of hope, that there is so much hope in the variety of things that we could do in Canada and the opportunities that lie ahead of us if we change our thinking about what milk and its components can be used for. So Christophe Lafleur, I'd like to really thank you for joining us on the podcast. And I think we could do a whole episode. So please, if you want to come back again, please do. We'd love to speak with you again.
Thank you very much. And a lot of hope for the Canadian dairy industry. So a lot of hope. Thank you very much.
Meet a Canadian dairy farmer. Planting one tree, then hundreds more to naturally purify the air. Preserving wildflowers for pollinators and nurturing wetlands for healthier soil. So wildlife can prosper.
Biodiversity is in our nature.
Working towards a sustainable future. That's Dairy Farming Forward.
Our guest is an economist specializing in the agricultural sector. He is lead of policy analysis at Dairy Farmers of Canada. Maxime studied agricultural economics at Laval University, where he earned a bachelor's and master's degree. He also holds a diploma in animal food production from the Institute of Agri-Food Technology. And we're just chatting here. I understand he also grew up on a dairy farm. Maxime Collette, welcome to the Canadian Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure. I'm really excited of the opportunity here. Yeah.
Maxime, welcome. It is great to have you and your presentation at the annual policy conference. I mean, I love looking at this market stuff. Like, you were a highlight for me in the day. So let's kind of break this out a little bit. One of the big stats, and this is one that we've heard a lot, is there's a lot of new Canadians. Over 1 million have come in the last year. That's got to have some impact on dairy. What's the impact?
Yeah, it is true that in 2023 the growth rate of population was way more than we used to see during the pre-pandemic years. In fact, the last time we observed as significant growth, it's in the end of 1950s. So it's been a while. In fact, during that decade, the population was estimated at 17 million Canadians. So it's been a couple of years. So more growth in terms of population, it's more mouth to feed, which is a good thing for sales of dairy products because you have to produce more to feed that people. So this is always a positive thing when the population grew at a higher rate because it means more production for us, for the dairy farmers. Yeah.
So what about consumption patterns when it comes to this? Can you say what factors are influencing what they're actually purchasing and eating at the store?
Yeah, that's a good question. As you know, we are in high food inflation, like in the recent 2 years. So the consumer had to deal with that. And the increase in terms of food price was higher than the increase in terms of personal income, which is disposable in this case. So they had to manage in a different way, consume a little bit different to deal with that food inflation that is increasing at a higher rate than the personal income. So what we have observed in 2023 is really consumer that buy more items on discount. They shift toward products that are lower in terms of prices as well, and less food waste in order to try to manage your food expenditure. And so we have observed those trends on the food expenditure, and this affected as well dairy, because at the end of the day, when we look at the per capita consumption, we see a decrease in terms of per capita consumption or personal consumption, except for yogurt. So that's the only product that we observe an increase. But as I was saying earlier, the strong population growth helped to bring the total sales in the positive area. So less personal consumption, a decrease, however, more people to feed. So at the end of the day, it's an increase in terms of sales for most of the dairy products, except for butter that even with the population increase, we observe a decrease in terms of total sales.
There's a lot to unpack in there because you've got the retail, the food
Yeah,
inflation,
yeah.
the consumer, habits. I want to break out a couple of those quick, just in terms of. First of all, I want to touch on your experience because you've been doing this you're coming up to 10 years now. Give me a sense, like we've seen that decline in per capita consumption. Do we think we come out of that over time, or what's the impact of food inflation, and how does it compare with other foods?
Okay, that's a good question. The per capita consumption diminution is more observed in 2023 because of the high inflation in terms of food prices. So this is really specific to the year 2023. But on the long term, there is an increase in terms of consumption per capita for yogurt, cheese, and cream as well. So those products are really going well in terms of per capita consumption on the long term. But if we really focus on the last year, given the food inflationary context, we have observed a decrease for 2023. So yeah.
And does butter bounce back? Because it's been the one that's kind of fallen the hardest.
Yeah, exactly. So as I was saying, that's a product that has like more competitors. So margarine, vegetable oil, canola oil, and shortenings, things like that. So that products in that category of different fat products has a higher price. And in this high inflationary context, that hurt the butter in terms of, because people decided to shift towards other type of products that are lower in terms of prices. But on the long term per capita, it's a product that was going well, and it's really in the specific context of 2023 that we observe like an important decline.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because I think when we think about plant-based products in the store, the first one that comes to mind is not really butter. We think about all these other competitors potentially, or different types of products in the grocery store. There's a whole mixture of things. How is plant-based beverage and the emergence of those types of things affecting milk sales specifically?
Yeah, it's a product that we have sales information at the retail level, and we've been observing like an increase from 2000, like the beginning of the data, so 2013 here to 2022, an increase in terms of market share. But for the first time in 2023, we observed a contraction in the market share for plant-based beverages. So it's really related to the food inflation situation, and the average price for plant-based beverages is higher than milk. So here consumers are trying to manage their food budget in order to arrive at the end of the day, and so that was an impact. Higher prices. We observe a shift towards milk. And milk, it is on average in 2023, it was $1.98 per liter on average, while plant-based beverages is $2.47 per liter. So this is significant in terms of difference. So this is a good thing for for the milk category. To see that contraction, it's more market share gain here for us. So. Yeah, that's the latest observation. And it's not only observed at the retail. We saw that contraction in the HRI, which is the hotel, restaurant, institution market. So this is, I'm really looking forward to see like in 2024, 2025, if we continue to see that contraction. But so far, it's a good news. Yeah, it's good news for us.
Then when you talk about 2024 into 2025, you've mentioned how impactful pricing can be.
Yeah.
What's retail pricing look like going into 2024-25?
That's a good question. We analyzed the December data. So we see a decrease in terms of pace. A slowdown in terms of pace. So food are now at 5% instead of 7.5% for the average of 2023. And dairy product is now at 3.5% instead of 6.5% for the average of 2023. So in December, dairy products at 3.5 is close to the overall inflation that is at 3.4. So we see that there is a slowdown in terms of food inflation and even like the overall inflation, which is a good thing. So it's less pressure on the consumer, and it's going to be a good news probably in 2024. Yeah, so it's heading towards like better sunny days, if I can say it like that.
Consumers are just going to be more comfortable. They're
Yeah,
not gonna
exactly.
be shocked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how about in comparison to our neighbors to the south? I mean, I know these comparisons are always made. We're always a little bit concerned as farmers about it being infinitely cheaper and everyone wanting to chase down those products. Can you tell us, is it actually true? Are things cheaper in the States?
Yeah, it's a myth that always stays because people are just looking at the price in the US on the shelf without doing the conversion. So of course, when we look at the US price on the shelf at the retail, it's going to be, it will seems to be lower. But when you do the conversion and in Canadian dollar and then you compare the similar products, it depends. Like some products are cheaper in Canada, such as cream. In 2023, cream, refrigerated yogurt, and butter were cheaper in Canada compared in the US. And I mean, the American production is 11 times ours. So they have the economy of scale, but at the end, and the work in liberalized market. And at the end of the day, our consumers are paying like a price that is higher for those dairy products than in Canada. So at the end of the day, supply managed system doesn't bring higher price for Canadian, because when you compare against a liberalized market, we see that Canadians are paying a lower price for dairy products that are under supply management, such as cream, refrigerated yogurt, and butter. So, which is a good thing for a consumer. Yeah.
Then just lastly, and you can get back to the conference, one of the other things you talked about was imports, because obviously we've had, with CUSMA and with CPTPP and with CETA and with all these other deals, this evolution of more and more imports. Give me an idea what that picture looks like. Are we kind of near the top of where imports are likely going to be, or what's the impact for producers going to be in the next couple of years?
That's a good question. So in terms of market access, it has been increasing, but the growth rate is slowing down. So because this is explained by the fact that some free trade agreement has reached the maturity in terms of market access. So in terms of market access in the CETA agreement, the maturity of the concession or the market access has been reached in 2022. So since that year, it's the same level of access given to that in that free trade agreement. For CPTPP, the maturity of the access will be reached in last year, so 2023. Then it's going to be really a slower growth, or we are talking about 1% a year. So for the market access, CUSMA, I would say it will be near maturity in 2025. Then it's going to be the mechanic it's a growth of 1%. So when we look at the access overall, we see that yes, it's increasing, but we see that the growth rate is declining. It's not declining, but slowing down, and which is a good thing because it's going to be more stable in terms of market access in the future.
Because of those imports, when we talk about population growth, has that kind of made it just flat for us as producers? When that population growth, we've seen the increase in just demand. Imports have just kind of filled that the last few years?
The production has been increasing, so we are able to capitalize on the growth as well. But if the level of import is more stable in terms of market access, of course, we're going to be more able to capitalize on the population growth in the future. But still, the import is hurting us, so that's a market that's been conceded. So that milk that could have been produced by our farmers. So at the end, it's hurting. But knowing that we're going to reach a certain level of maturity is better for us to anticipate the level of imports and then adjust the production accordingly to the demand. Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating stuff, Maxime. If producers who are listening to us right now want to have more access to this side of the work that you do at DFC, where could they find that?
We have a quarterly skim available, and this is like a review of the market. We put other stuff such as the evolution of the imports. We write about the consumption as well. So quarterly skim that is available, and that provides a good glimpse of the market trend and more the economic side of the dairy industry. So it's available once a quarter. Quarterly skim.
Well, this probably won't be the last you hear from us. There's so much to talk about on this topic.
So in the Dairy Express as well, the app, so there are some content available as well.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for making the time to talk with us today.
Thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Well, Sarah, I think when you look at both kind of the domestic outlook, it's always interesting to hear from Maxime. He's got lots of experience in this area, but then to hear that global perspective too and what might be possible, it leaves me pretty optimistic where we could be with the dairy market in the next few years.
Yes, there is an awful lot to think about, but I think in terms of the opportunities as well as the positioning of our country, we're really kind of prepared, to head into this space, and I think we've got a lot to look forward to.
We certainly do. So if you have liked this episode, you can give us a follow on Facebook and on Twitter. And make sure, if you give us a like with your favorite streaming platform, to check us out at the Canadian Podcow YouTube channel. Mostly you can hear us, but sometimes you can even see us.
Not today. If you have comments or suggestions, please drop us a note at podcast@canadianpodcow.ca. And again, we would like to give a huge thanks to our sponsor, the Dairy Farmers of Canada, and of course to our wonderful production team who do a great job of making us sound fantastic, Bruce Sargent and Carl Bailout.